I am profoundly lonely and clear and separate and fully conscious of why. And that combination is what hurts the most. Because clarity doesn't cancel loneliness. It explains it. And explanation doesn't soothe pain. It just removes the illusion that something is wrong with me for feeling it. I'm lonely in my body, in my thinking, in how I experience the world. Lonely in a way that isn't solved by being around people, or being liked, or being loved, or being understood on paper. Because what I'm lonely for isn't presence. It is contact. And real contact is rare. Not because people are cruel or mean or evil, but because most connection is built on not seeing too much. And that's the part not many people talk about. We talk about awakening, awareness, healing, freedom, like they're all upgrades, as if they bring only relief. And don't get me wrong, they are indeed upgrades. But clarity doesn't bring you closer to people. It pulls you out of the shared hallucination they use to feel safe together. And once you see that, once you stop pretending you don't see it, you don't just lose illusions, you lose access. I didn't become self-preserving because I'm bitter. I became self-preserving because I watched how often the truth gets punished. Not loudly, but quietly. With withdrawal, with discomfort masked as concern, with silence that pretends to be peace. Self-preservation is grief that's finally found a safe place to land. In myself. I still want connection. I want it deeply. But I don't want it badly enough to lie anymore. And that is where the fracture happens. Because most people don't actually want to connect. They want to remain attached. They want regulation, familiarity. They want mirroring that soothes their limbic system, not truth that disrupts their self-image. So when I speak from clarity, when I name patterns instead of participating in them, it doesn't feel connecting to them. It feels threatening. Not because I'm attacking, but because I'm not playing along. That's when the language shows up. You're intense. You overthink. Why does everything have to be so deep? Can't you just let it go? See, those aren't questions. They are boundaries disguised as concern. They are ways of saying, please don't make me see what I'm working very hard not to see. And I understand that. I really do. Because clarity does not come with comfort. It comes with responsibility. Once you see something clearly, and you can't unsee it, and you can't unknow the cost of staying. So here's the part people really don't want exposed. Authentic freedom is not always liberating. Sometimes it's challenging as fuck to remain firm in your own inner authority because it's quiet. It's unsupported. It's lonely in a way that doesn't get romanticized. You lose the warm anesthesia of belonging. You lose the social rewards for pretending. And you lose the illusion that being liked is the same thing as being met. Freedom doesn't always feel like expansion. It feels like standing alone in a room where everyone else is dancing to music that you can't pretend to hear anymore. And that is where my self-preservation lives. Not in contempt for people, but in exhaustion with performance being sold as intimacy. Which leads me to death. Because death has been present in my life, not as an urge or a fantasy, but as a reference point, a line that does not move, a boundary that doesn't negotiate. And people try to sell death too. Reincarnation, heaven and hell, ascending, returning to source, lessons, purpose, continuity. Even death isn't allowed to just end. It gets packaged, moralized, turned into a promise so people don't have to sit with finality. But here's a fact that no belief system can erase. This person I am, this body, this voice, this personality, and this meat suit, this specific configuration of memory, pain, humor, and choice ends. Even if consciousness continues. Even if something persists. Even if there's something that our souls return to, this version of me does not. Pam, as she is, ends. That is not spiritual. That is biological. And that truth brings me more peace than most relationships ever have. Because it is honest. It doesn't ask me to stay open indefinitely. It doesn't promise reunion if I behave correctly. It doesn't guilt me into hope. It doesn't require interpretation. It just finishes. And after a lifetime of connections that never actually arrive, relationships that linger without resolution, conversations that circle but never land, people who stay close only as long as I stay smaller, I trust an ending that doesn't pretend. I'm not drawn to death. I'm drawn to completion. And we live in a culture that is terrified of completion. Everything must be processed, integrated, reframed, healed, revisited, worked on, worked around. Nothing is allowed to end cleanly. So we live in permanent limbo. Endless almost connections. Endless almost truths. Endless I hear you without actual contact. And then we wonder why people are exhausted. Why clarity feels isolating. Why cynicism can creep in. Why awareness doesn't feel like relief. It's because most of life is organized around avoiding endings. And I refuse that. I refuse relationships that can't meet or end. I refuse conversations that keep me open but never held. I refuse being told my clarity is a problem because it disrupts someone else's comfort. And yes, sometimes that refusal sounds like rage. Sometimes it sounds like laughter. Sometimes it sounds like, fuck this. And none of that makes me cruel or bad. It makes me honest and human. Because screaming is not the opposite of connection. Silencing yourself is. And I am done being quiet to preserve bonds that were never real. I know there are others like me. I know because I've seen it in glances, in comments, in messages people send quietly, privately, almost apologetically, in the way someone exhales when I finally say the thing they've never been allowed to say out loud. They're not looking for a megaphone. They're looking for recognition. For someone to say, you're not broken for seeing this. You're not cold for refusing the lie. And you're not unlovable because you will not pretend. So, this isn't about being edgy. It's about refusing a world where connection is traded for compliance. Because I will take loneliness over self-betrayal. I will take clarity over comfort. I will take a real ending over an endless performance. And if that makes me isolated, so be it. At least I am here. I'm whole. I'm real. I'm not numbing or abandoning myself for belonging that never actually met me. This isn't a call to agree with me or a demand for understanding. It's a line drawn in the sand. I will not make myself smaller so that others can stay asleep. And I will not call that love. If you recognize yourself here, you already know. This was never about being alone. It was about telling the truth and accepting what it costs.